Thanks for listening to Creative Outcomes. I'm Jimmy Balo from Upsourced. We're a CFO and accounting firm focused on helping creative agencies. I'm looking forward to our chat today with Chris DuBois, the founder of the Dynamic Agency O.S. He's a former agency operator and CEO who now works with agency owners as a consultant. Chris helps agencies shift from founder-driven operations to founder-led operations. Thanks so much for taking the time to join me today. How are you doing, Chris?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. I appreciate I'm looking forward to this conversation and excited to jump in. I think your background and where you started from and sort of your journey as sort of like an agency consultant and sort of how you got here is really interesting to me. I think one of the things that really stood out just as I was kind of doing some research and sort of prepping for this was I just found it really interesting how before being a consultant, you were kind of sitting in sort of like the CEO and operator seat for an agency. And so I guess one of the places that I just wanted to kind of start from is just what were some of the big takeaways or lessons learned from sort of sitting in that operator seat and being the CEO of a fast growing agency?
Yeah. So it's interesting because I did not have an agency background at all. Came out of college, went right into the Army as an infantry officer. So all of the lessons that I pulled from the Army went into agency world, and where I started as a marketer, and I don't know, 9 months later became head of operations. Did that for a couple of years, and became CEO. So I got to kind of see the levels within the agency, and like, all right, first I'm doing a lot more with my hands, and then I kept kind of backing up and going more into like the leadership role I was used to from the Army. The critical pieces that I think I learned while there, man, there's a lot. Like I feel I was in the agency for 5 years, and we did. I mean, we're made the Inc. 5000, 2 Comic Club awards, all those fun things. I think the biggest thing was that you have a team of experts, and if you can figure out how to best like deploy them right within your business, you can get so much out of everybody, and they're generally going to be happier with what you're giving them for tasks and roles. Um, the my developers, I learned very quick. Developers do not like to do just monotonous stuff, even though it looks super boring to me. If I could throw them a challenge, they for some reason were working harder, were wanted to keep, like, I had to tell them to stop working, right? Like, slow down, guys. Like, you're okay, because they just love the challenge. I had other team members who, like, I would throw them, some SEO research, and it's like they would just dive in because they found it so fascinating. Which, again, not something that I'm like, yay, keyword research, like, let's do it. uh, but like when you could figure out what every individual actually want to do, what motivates them, uh, figuring out how to train someone, super easy, right? If you know where someone is and where they want to go, you can create a training plan for everybody. But figuring out the motivation for people is very hard. And in the Army, it's like you didn't need motivation. Like, it helped, but you're showing up, you're doing your job because that's your job. In this world, you get to choose your jobs, right? And in the normal world. And so being able to kind of work with people and figure out what their motivations were to be able to help them deploy them in a way that actually benefited everyone was fun, and just a great leadership kind of I don't know, challenge and opportunity.
Totally. So obviously, like the agency world and like the business model, it's if you were to just boil it down into its simplest terms, it's people and projects. And so many orgs, like the people make up sort of the culture and the people sort of make up the organization. I think one of the things that really spoke to me and it's just something that I was like really interested in was just listening to just some of the work that you've obviously created and talked about and this it sounds easier said than done, but like hiring and hiring the right people at any agency is so critical and so important. um when you were kind of in the operator seat, how did you think about that? How did you go about that? Obviously, one of the things that you've talked about previously is just character hires and how important that is during the interview process. I this is kind of a two-parter, I guess, but when you were sort of going through that, like Was there a framework that you used, or how did you kind of approach that when it came to hiring?
Yeah, so we grew from the time I got there. We were probably 10ish team members. We got up to almost 30 at one point. So we did a lot of hiring, right, to find the find the right people. What I realized through hundreds of interviews is that there's a very big difference between 10 years of experience and 1 year of experience 10 times. And a lot of people are in that latter camp where they haven't got the actual reps. They've fallen into some sort of rut where they just like they're doing the same thing, right? And they're learning it, but they're not kind of expanding enough to actually learn what they're doing and become masters of what they're doing. Where in the agency world, like we have this awesome opportunity to be able to learn faster than anyone else. No other business is set up in a way to give you so many reps so fast. And I mean, there's a bunch of things that I learned from this. One, if you can get the right people in the door, your processes really don't matter as much, right? Especially as a smaller team. Like having processes, awesome. We want to be able to maintain that efficiency, keep more revenue in our pocket later. But like the right people are going to figure it out, and then you can document the process then. And so uh, I started just thinking through, okay, well, how do I get the right people in here? When I started looking for people just based on skill, they were either charging a ton of money to be able to get like that expertise in, um, or they just didn't necessarily have those skills anyways. And so it was really hard to find the right people. But what I realized is that if I find the right people from a character perspective, then it became much easier to bring them in. It was like finding the Avengers versus the Mickey Mouse Club, right? It's only a handful of Avengers you're going to be able to bring in. You're going to pay top dollar for them. The Mickey Mouse Club, literally everyone knows the names of people who are in the Mickey Mouse Club, right? Justin Timberlake, Britney Spears, Ryan Gosling, like Christina Aguilera. Like these names, and they were just kids. Like they had no recognition before, and then the Mickey Mouse Club used their systems and processes to be able to like train them and get them up to what they need to be, and now they're household names. Um, but so I guess framework wise, I just needed to figure out how quick could someone fit into our culture and have the character that I need to be able to train them and know that they're going to show up and put in the work every day. And so the first thing I would do in any of these conversations was um, kind of build trust, like initial trust, right? Every person is constantly asking two questions. It's, am I safe and do I matter? No matter what. So our reptile brains constantly doing that because back in the caveman days, if I'm not safe, right? There's a saber-toothed tiger, right? And then do I matter? Does the tribe actually want me here? Because if I don't have the tribe, that saber-toothed tiger is going to get me anyway. So in a conversation, right? It's like you almost disarm them by using this. And so I've gone into conversations for interviews where their hands are shaking. You can tell they're sweating. We're on a Zoom call and stuff, and I can still see you glistening. But it's like, hey, check it out. This is just a conversation, right? We're just gonna talk. We're gonna figure this out. Um, I want you to actually interview me as much as I'm going to be interviewing you, because if we're not a good fit for you, none of this matters. Right. And so as soon as they realize they have some more power, they usually kind of relax a little more. And then we were able to actually get into questions about them and like kind of learn more than just what they feel the right answer is for the interview. But then I would always ask at some point in there, like just for them to teach me something, like give me something that you enjoy that you could just very quickly teach me in like 5 minutes. And usually you get some pretty crazy insights from just asking that question. You get to see some of their character by what are they passionate about? Are they actually passionate about something? Because if you can be passionate about one thing, you can probably be passionate about other things. Um, but then you just get to see how they interact and how they think through things, rather than getting these like stocked responses that they've just rehearsed, the same answer. Um, and then and so yeah, usually those go really well, and I'm usually able to get a good feel. But I would also reach out to references that are not on their reference list, and that seemed to help. Just look at people who worked at a company with them and reach out. Just, hey, do you mind sharing a couple things? Like, and because the people that they put on that list are the people they want on that list. I know I've built reference lists. Like I'm putting the people who are going to make me seem like a god. And so I'm not falling for that. And but yeah, that usually gave me a pretty good bearing on the individual, and we can go from there.
Okay. No, I love that. Um, I just think obviously like hiring it makes or breaks an organization, and I think it's so important. Um, and obviously, like having been through that and hired dozens of people, obviously like those lessons learned are pretty fantastic. Um, on the flip side, like obviously like things look a little bit different, especially right now. Agencies budgets are getting cut. They're having to kind of downsize. They're trying to kind of figure things out. Um, how did you know what that looked like in terms of like when was the right time to unfortunately like have to let some team members go, and like how much did you have to cut, and how did you kind of like sort of evaluate that when you were sort of sitting in like the operator seat? And obviously those are difficult conversations, and you obviously want to make sure that you're sort of handling things like with respect and making sure that everyone's in like the best place that they can possible, but you ultimately have to like do what's best for the organization as well and the other people that are still on the team. And it just sometimes can be a really sort of like tough balancing act. How did you sort of approach the other end of things?
Yeah, so we're pretty fortunate to never have to go to layoffs. Um, we fired some people, but usually it's for like performance issues, stuff like that. And there were some people who were just on the fence. Right, one of the I think it's from the Hermosis. A great question that they ask is like, when you look at an individual, is the bar raised, maintained, or lowered by that individual? If everyone else on the team had to work at that level, what would happen? And when you start framing things like that, you start to actually see like, hey, this person really isn't making the cut. And so with that, you go into like a kind of a three strike kind of rule. Go and make a plan with them, right? Give them the opportunity to actually improve. You're the leader. Give them that growth plan that dictates exactly what they need to do in order to be successful. If they can't do it, you come back after whatever period of time you've agreed on, and you say, hey, plan didn't work. Let's try another one. You give them that next plan. You work that out, and if it still doesn't work, it's like, hey, let's find a way to get you a position that you actually want to be in, right, somewhere else. And there's tons of different approaches and different reasons that could happen. But yeah, I don't know if that that answered your question.
No, no, no. I like that, and I think that the bar framework about how to think about that, I think that's really tactical, and I appreciate you sharing that. I guess shifting gears a little bit. So, like, obviously, you were the CEO, you were in the operator seat. You've since transitioned from out of sort of running the day to day of an agency and moved more into like a agency consultant role, where you're working with agency owners on a daily basis. What sort of prompted that shift? How is that sort of transition to working for yourself and being a consultant? How's that been going?
So at some point, I had realized like I could help a lot of people do exactly what I'm doing here at this agency, and uh, and so it was kind of like I don't want to say a calling. It was just like I'm ready to do something else, and this is something where I can actually have an impact and help people. And so like making that shift was good. Um, it's interesting, right? With every business, and I'm sure there's agency owners who can go with this. I wanted to do leadership coaching entirely, and there was not as much of a market need at the time for that. But what I realized was like, well, what the market does need is just agency coaching, and really with leadership skills, being able like being that first. I don't know, like the taking of the beachhead, right? To be able to do everything else. It's like we can get those leadership skills into your agency. Now everything else becomes easier. And so rather than just doing executive leadership coaching, I was like, well, I have experience, working with agencies in an agency. Let me go apply that. And since making that shift, it's been great.
What is there like a certain type of agency that you specifically work with, or like any and all, or what sort of like what does what would be like sort of the ideal agency for you?
Yeah. So marketing creative agencies right now, I got like web shops, SEOs. Those seem to make up the majority. I prefer working with agencies that have teams. I'm going to get you more bang for your buck if you got a team that I can help you, deploy appropriately, and so that's, yeah, really teams of 5 or more, and that's where, my belief is that that's where agency life becomes fun. Um, but yeah,
Yeah. No, that's, I mean, we're in a similar boat. It's like typically like the agencies that are the best fit for us are when they're sort of like north of 10 full-time employees. Sometimes it'll be less than that, just depending on the situation and the agency. But that's usually kind of like where we start and begin to kind of like work with the team. Um, I guess speaking on like sort of leadership development, that was something that I know that you have a lot of history with, a lot of background, something that you're passionate about. Um, as you're kind of thinking through leadership development, and sometimes that can just kind of be like a blanket term that can kind of get tossed out there. How do you sort of approach that type of work, and what's the lens that you kind of view it from? I've heard you talk about like dynamic leadership and how to kind of work with teams. But what is that lens that you kind of approach things through?
yeah. So when I was in the army as a platoon leader, I did really well as a lieutenant, right? As a platoon leader, and then the battalion commander pulled me up to work with him, and it gave me a completely different perspective on the unit. So I went from like kind of the lowest level that an officer can be working at to much high, like the highest level within a battalion. So I got just this different perspective now. And what I noticed was that the leaders who were coming in and crushing it, they could go to one unit, be successful there, and then go to another unit and be successful there as well. While other ones would be successful somewhere, go to the next unit and tried leading the exact same way and they weren't successful. And so through conversations with, people who grossly outranked me at the time, I was able to like start formulating my own ideas around leadership. And that's where dynamic leadership came in, where the idea is that you can show up, and changing everyone else probably isn't going to happen. Changing your situation probably isn't going to happen, but you can change yourself, right? You have these skills, you have this understanding of yourself. So with some awareness, you can shift everything to kind of morph into what the situation and the team need in order to accomplish your mission. And so for me, I guess leadership development is a lot of just building what I call the three like requisite skills: awareness, communication, and trust. And really just like understanding those with those three, you can pretty much do anything as a leader. And there's a bunch of little like exercise and stuff, but that's leadership development. It's being able to go in and say, we need to accomplish this. I need to get these people, from A to B, and I really need them to be able to do it because they want to do it, not because I'm, like cracking a whip.
If I'm and obviously like everyone's situation is a little bit different, and every agency is a little bit different. But if I'm a CEO, or if I'm on the leadership team for an agency and I'm listening to this and I hear you talk about like the ACT framework: awareness, communication, trust, where would you start, or how would you go about sort of incorporating this into your leadership style, or as you're sort of having your one-on-ones with your direct reports? Like how do you get even started with this?
Yeah. So first step's awareness. I think that's like the one of the most underappreciated skills people can have in life. Period. Right? Just awareness, self awareness. I view there's four types: self awareness, interpersonal awareness, so just of others; team awareness, being able to understand how groups operate; and then situational awareness, which is what's going on around me. And if you can kind of get a good bearing on all four of those, it makes it much easier to do everything because you start realizing certain things, right? Like how many people just neglect their emotions? I'm not a big like woo woo guy for a lot of this, but like if you're feeling something, it's a signal, right? There's a sign that something is about to happen, or you're not feeling good about a decision. And when you can pay closer attention to those emotions, you're able to make decisions much faster because you realize what's actually right and what's wrong. Or hey, I said something and their face told me, they didn't like that. Let me go check in with them. It's like little things that show that you actually care as a leader, that those who aren't aware just cannot like bring that in. Um, that is easily where I'd start.
Awesome. Okay. Um, I think the big one that I'm interested in, and I think that is super critical in any organization, any relationship, um, trust. I think that you have to be able to kind of build trust as a leader, and within whether you're starting the company and growing it from one person all the way up, or if you're entering into a larger organization. From day one, you have to be able to build trust with your peers, with your clients, with the people around you, just in your daily life. How have you seen leaders successfully build trust, whether they're starting a new agency or coming into a larger one?
Yeah, I think the biggest piece to understand is that trust is built through predictability, right? The more I can believe a certain event is going to happen, then the more likely I'm going to trust that it'll happen. And so I like using if then statements for it, where you can, essentially turn it into a formula, right? Like if this, then this. And the more believable that statement becomes, the easier it is to trust. And so you need to be able to build this predictability with your teams. And so the leaders, especially within agencies, that I've seen just crushing it on trust building very fast is by just doing what they say they're going to do, right? Like actually holding themselves accountable to whatever that measure is, because they know the team is looking at them for that predictability. And so when you say, "Hey, if you bring me a problem, I'm going to take 5 minutes to solve this problem," right? And work through it. If I can't, maybe we have to move it aside or something, but like that's what we're going to do. Even client expectations, right? Same thing. Like when we say we're not taking on projects outside of this scope and stuff, you're holding to that. You're not just calling your team late on a Friday night to be like, "Hey, we actually need to go knock this out. Need you to come back in and take care of this." Right? No, like we can't do those types of things. And so, yeah, the leaders that I know are crushing it are the ones who are really setting great expectations and then holding everyone accountable to that. Because as a leader, you maintain that standard. Like that is, you get to decide how everything operates, within your organization. And yeah, really, that's what it comes down to: is to build that predictability. And it kind of plays into as well the am I safe and do I matter, as people are asking that, right? When you can ask those questions and still be have the predictability of people knowing that you're not just trying to like manipulate them and do all of these other things, right? You're actually doing it because you care about them. You can very rapidly build trust.
Yeah, I think obviously, especially in today's day and age where you so many teams are hybrid or distributed or remote, or they're not in the same office every single day. Um, that trust component is really huge, but also I think it factors into the cultural component where culture, it makes up an organization. It can make or break the way that a team feels about a company and how long employees stay with the company and what the experience is for clients at the agency. Um, I think that one of the things that I've heard you talk about, and the one of the things that you've mentioned in the past is culture is the one thing a leader truly owns. Um, how like when you're kind of thinking about culture and how agencies can go about sort of shifting their culture or building upon an amazing culture that they've already created, what type of work do you typically do with agencies if they're wanting to kind of evolve their culture?
Sure. My favorite definition of culture is from Seth Godin, which is people like us do things like this. And when you realize like that's every tribe, right? Every group of people, they're together because they're doing something a very specific way. Now, within a your organization, you as a leader get to set the culture, right? And that's you saying this is the standard because people like us do things like this. The team now actually has influence over the climate, and that's how the organization actually appears, right? And so we have a difference between the culture and the climate, which is called the culture gap. The bigger this gap, the more of a problem we have, and the further from what you're actually trying to do you are. And so, working with leaders to figure this stuff out, it's really just getting super clear on your vision, being able to say, this is the standard. This is what I'm going to hold everyone accountable to. right? Going back to the predictability so that everyone can trust that I'm going to do this. Even if they're not happy with it, you can trust that this is how we're going to be showing up. And then even looking at hires, right? Does this person lower that bar, maintain the bar, raise it? Um, and because those are all pieces of you just maintaining that standard that you have set. And then once your team starts seeing like, hey, this is that standard, they're going to start holding themselves accountable to it because they want to be part of the tribe. And so, especially if you're doing a big shift, getting the team's buy-in, getting them to actually, you know, like provide their thoughts, their feedback to be able to kind of shape that culture. You, as a leader, ultimately like the one who gets to make the decision and actually holds everyone accountable to it. Um, but like the more buy-in you can get, the easier it is to actually make that cultural shift across the organization.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. In your work, working with agencies, when you're coming in, when you're assessing just kind of the landscape, how do you know sort of what the culture is at this agency? Or like, are you having interviews with employees or talking to clients, or what does that assessment look like? And how can you tell if an agency has a culture that someone wants to be a part of, or a culture that may need some improvement?
Yeah, usually it's pretty easy if you ask the leader how are things supposed to run around here, like what does a normal day look like. And a lot of times they'll be honest and say like, oh, man, I got fires to put out all the time, right? Like I got this chaos over here, these clients are a pain in the, whatever. I don't know if we got an explicit tag on here. uh, and the and so then you go talk to the team members, and they'll usually echo the same things. And I can tell when a leader's very clear and like open about all of that stuff, it's usually exactly what's going on. They have some awareness to be able to share that. Other leaders very tied to like it's like an ego thing, right? They don't like that the culture isn't how they actually want it. But going in, talking to the team, and saying what challenges do you have, what are you seeing, but really just almost doing the same kind of culture to climate gap like scenario, but looking at it, hey, if we think we should be delivering products within 7 days, right? That's our but it looks like it's actually taking 11 days for all of these to get over. It's like, hey, we got a gap. So one, that's probably influencing our culture because of a bunch of other things. Let's go see what those challenges are. You can just talk to people, dive deeper. Hey, I can't find the processes. I don't know there were processes, right? There's all like these different reasons people will give you. Um, and it ultimately just comes down to the standard was lowered because someone didn't raise a hand and say, hey, we can't find the processes. Who's can tell me? Um, and so we bring that up to the leader, and then, yeah, things start to open up from there.
Totally. Awesome. Well, Chris, I know we're coming up on time. If people want to reach out, learn more, just get in touch with you. Where's the best place to direct them?
Sure. Dynamic Agency O.S.com. You can find everything on there, a bunch of different offers, a bunch of ways you can kind of engage with the brand and other brands that we're partnering with. And so, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you being here today, and thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.